This movie was so complex. Hey guys, welcome to the Bin Zone. On today's video, we're breaking down the movie Tenet, looking at the plot, the story, time inversion, physics, and all things that make a Christopher Nolan movie, and breaking down the flow of time, the word Tenet, the time paradoxes that this movie creates, as well as the twilight and inversion itself. So without further ado, let's just dive into this because there's a lot to unpack. I mean, watching this movie, your brain melts. Just what in the world is going on? That is your reaction throughout the movie as you try to wrap your mind around this complex web of storytelling, as well as this complex metaphysical dilemma, which is time inversion. So what is time inversion? Let's dive into that. In general, time itself and entropy itself moves in one way. The flow of time only moves forward, and entropy itself is the force that creates the universe. The Big Bang caused a release of entropy out into the universe, and just like our universe is forever expanding, time itself is forever moving forward, forever moving from one point to the other, never going back. But what if you could actually find a way to take time and entropy, and instead of having time move this way, you have time move in the opposite direction? That is the very premise of Tenet, and even the title itself, Tenet, T-E-N-E-T, is a palindrome. Spelling it this way and spelling it that way, it spells the exact same thing, kind of like Hannah, same thing, forward and backwards. And that's the whole plot of this movie. The beginning of the movie and the end of the movie are the same exact thing. What I mean by that is, it's not the first scene being the same scene as the last, but the story could be told in two different ways. If you watch Tenet from the start time all the way to the end, you get the gist of the movie. But if you start the movie at the end and you watch it in reverse or you watch it in rewind, it is the exact same movie. The exact same story is being told in both directions. And that's because of time inversion. Time inversion is taking the forward momentum of time, the forward momentum of entropy, and moving it backwards. Think of Tenet, the movie itself, as a line segment. A line that has two endpoints. The endpoints are both the bookends of the story, and it starts at one end and end in the other end, right? But then it could also start at this end and end that way. So it's a sentence, a line segment moving in two opposite directions, and that is the overall premise of the time inversion. Time moving forward, time moving backwards. Shooting a gun and having the bullet fire, as well as having the bullet return to your gun, is the very basic premise and a very simplistic way of looking at Tenet. Where this movie gets super complex is in its application of this. So what if time itself is moving forward, and that's the way the universe works, the algorithm of the universe, if you will. What happens if in the future we find a way to reverse that flow? And in the movie, that's what happens. In the far future, a scientist creates this machine called the algorithm that can control the flow of time, the flow of matter. And with that machine, you essentially become a god yourself, because existence, age, time, all of that doesn't matter if you have supreme control over the flow of time itself. You're immortal in a sense, because you can both live in the future, in the past, stop your own death, create your own birth. It's all one whole causal thing. And the way things happen, the way things unfold, normally is cause and effect. This happens for this to happen. But what if the effect causes the cause? And that's the kind of idea we're looking in when we look at the movie Tenet. The cause and effect isn't linear. It can be cyclical, and this entire movie plays out that way because we're introduced to our main character, the protagonist, in the very beginning of the movie, and he's recruited into Tenet. And Tenet's sole purpose is to stop the end of the world, but not the typical end of the world plot where it's nuclear holocaust via World War III. No, the one who controls time has the ultimate power to end or save the world, because the bad guy of this movie has the plan to end all time. The way he's gonna end all time is he's gonna use the algorithm to cause a massive shift in the way the world moves. So if the world is moving in one direction and he moves the entire world in the opposite direction, the flow of time going this way, the flow of time going that way, both matters are gonna clash, and it's actually gonna cause them to rip apart each other. And in order for them to stop that, Tenet is formed and they have to stop him. But how do you stop time from ending? How do you stop existence from happening? And that's where Tenet starts to look at the many worlds theory as well as the grandfather paradox. But instead of expanding that, Tenet kind of bottles it up. Think of Tenet the movie as this water bottle. This is one end of it, this is the other end. and all the events are happening inside of TENET. So they move the events this way and then they reverse it to move that way, never expanding forward, never expanding backwards. So essentially the very nature of this movie is a self-contained slice of time. The movie Tenet doesn't go beyond the ending and it doesn't go beyond the beginning. So all the events happen in this constricted space within this line segment, always moving forward, always moving backwards. That way this time inversion technology cannot leave this line segment. So with this algorithm, having the ability to reverse chronology throughout the movie plays a titular role. So with this technology and having the ability to reverse time, it plays a major role in this movie, as we see throughout the movie multiple of the same character exist within that same time. For example, there can exist 4 different me's at the same time and we're all moving in the same time, doing different actions, but those actions always happen the way they're supposed to happen. One thing that Tenet really follows is a very crucial rule of time, is whatever happened in the past will always happen. A prime example is the future you cannot kill the past you, because the past you has to grow up to become the future you, thus creating the grandfather paradox. You create the very you that goes on to stop the very you from creating you, and then that's when your brain starts to get frazzled, because it's a lot to take in. Like the future you, the past you, it's a lot, but the movie tries its best to explain it, but at certain points in the movie, it's just, there's no explanation, because the bad guy of this movie is working with his future self. His future self and his past self are in coordination to end all of existence. The main antagonist of this movie is a megalomaniac. He has pancreatic cancer and he has inoperable pancreatic cancer, so he can't heal himself. And because he's a megalomaniac, he realizes that I'm gonna die no matter what I do. As much time as I spend going back and forth with myself, at one point I will die. So if I'm gonna die and I can't enjoy time, I can't enjoy the world, I'm gonna destroy the entire world with me. And he has no regrets for doing this. His only regret, his biggest sin, is the fact that he brought a son into the world knowing that the world is doomed. And he himself believes him to be God. So if he believes himself to be God, if God does not exist, the world cannot exist. So his whole plan is to blow up everything, because he who fashions himself as God does not exist, therefore the world just don't exist. So throughout the movie, our main protagonist is trying to stop him, while also trying to figure out just what the fuck is going on and how all of this works. But we come to find out at the end, and we're about to step into the ending territory, that our main protagonist as well as Neil are the ones who start Tenet. And while our protagonist himself doesn't know what's happening, his future self contacted Neil in the past, and he trained Neil to be his own assistant and guide him along the path to be himself. So he essentially creates Tenet to put himself on the path to actually creating Tenet. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I create the very machinations that make me create those machinations, a grandfather paradox. And in the movie Tenet, while this grandfather paradox is a closed loop, they also mention the fact that there exist alternate timelines in which things go differently. Because throughout the movie, protagonist wants to know, what if I do things differently? What if I change a certain thing so it doesn't repeat itself? And the other characters tell him, you can't do that. For you to do that, you would create an alternate timeline. So there exists multiple timelines in this universe, because we know at the end, Kat ends up shooting Andre, the main bad guy, therefore killing him in order to stop him from going on and carrying on his plans. But that can't happen, because for Kat to kill Andre, that means that Andre never tries to destroy the world, and therefore Tenet's never formed. But because Tenet is formed, that means her plan to kill Andre works in this timeline, but it doesn't work in an alternate timeline. So while the movie itself is set within this line segment, the very nature of her killing him and jumping off the boat does one of two things. It either reaffirms what happens and Andre never really dies, so the whole cycle starts all over again, or it creates an alternate timeline in which the events of the movie unfold differently. But because we see her look at herself and dive and inspire herself to go down that path, I don't think it creates an alternate timeline. It just starts to loop all over again. So essentially, Tenet is a movie that is stuck between 2 points. Tenet will forever happen within this line paragraph in which time goes forward, time goes backwards, but always to the same endpoint. The creation of Tenet and the recruitment of the protagonist into Tenet. And the movie itself is confined to that space. There is no grandiose time paradox. There is no grandiose look at the universe. It's one simple story, one simple machinations going back and forth between these two endpoints. But anyway, guys, that's Tenet in a nutshell. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. And if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button if you guys have not already. And until next time, binge on.